Hello guys, welcome back. So let's load up my work version of Lightwave, not the ScreamerNET version of Lightwave. So I have it here. So of course I have this project-based content set up for all the projects. I don't have a global content directory. So I need to of course prepare some content for that ScreamerNET content. Sounds a little bit weird, but hey. So I will load this one called Lightwave 11 ScreamerNET test and open that one up. So I'm currently, if I bring up, I can go here and go to paths. So this is my content that I'm currently resides within. So what I have here is an animation, camera animation. I have set up a global illumination cache. I have lowered all the settings so that it renders fast for testing with ScreamerNET, of course. So it's not going to look very beautiful, but it's a good test scene for ScreamerNET, as I said. And since I'm also using a global illumination cache, I want to make sure that that works as well with ScreamerNET. So what I do when I have this scene file set up is to go to the render globals and output, and I will choose where I want this stuff to be stored. And in this case I need to, or should, go to the ScreamerNET content folder, and I will just create a new little folder here called renders, and then I will create a new subfolder called TAC2, and then another one that I will call ScreamerNET test. So okay. So let's save this scene. So now I need to transfer this scene over to the ScreamerNET content. So let's go to export, import export, and let's use package scene. And I simply just select my end drive here, and let's just hit OK. And in this case I want to copy the reduced to cache file as well. So let's just hit OK, and it's finished. So if we bring up N here, we can see that these folders have been created for me now. So I'm essentially ready to render this scene, but just in case, what I want to do is to go to edit, set content directory, and what we can see is that when you use package scene, Lightwave automatically changes the content to the target content directory. So we can see that that is already set up. So just in case, I will just load that scene up, just make sure that everything loads. And it does, and if I do an F9 render, we can see that the cache file is found as well. So that's okay. So let's minimize this Lightwave now. Let's go to our O drive, and I will start up this version of Lightwave, my ScreamerNET controller version of Lightwave. And yeah, it takes a little bit of time. It has to think. So oh yeah, there it comes. So go to render tab and bring up where is it? Network render. There. So how many CPUs do I have? Well, I would just test with one at this point, so I've just set it one to one. Where is my command directory? Well, it's here. So okay. And I don't want to initialize right now because I haven't started any node yet. So let's start up a node. So I go to O, I go to ScreamerNET bats, and I just run that, just hitting enter. You can also right click and use open, for example, or run, or whatever it says. Okay, so it now complains that it can't find these job files. So that's when you go back to your ScreamerNET version of layout here, and let's just hit ScreamerNET. And we can see that it finds that node. So let's add a scene to the list, open, and let's hit ScreamerRender. So if I bring up this CMD window now, we can see that all the plugins are loaded, the content is loaded, and it seems to be working quite nicely. And it also finds the radiosity cache. So if I pop into my content directory, go to renders, tag 2, ScreamerNET test. Here is a folder that EXR Trader created for me. So here we can see the renders. But I actually want to change something here, so let's go back here, and instead of using the OpenEXR dummy saver, I will change it to a PNG 24-bit render. Let's save. Okay. Let's go back here to ScreamerNET. Let's cancel the render, and let's just hit ScreamerRender again, so that it reloads the scene file and start to save out those PNG files for me as well. So the PNG files should reside in here, and we can see that the first frame was rendered out correctly. So it seems to be working quite nicely. So of course I would like to test this now with another computer, so I know that, and you know, I'm not just lucky at this point, because I'm simulating on a single computer networking here. So I need to test this, of course, to map these two folders on another computer and see if that works as well. So I will be back in a moment. So I'm back in a moment. I realized that when you add more nodes to ScreamerNET, it's very good to make sure that ScreamerNET isn't running or anything. So what I will do here, before I run away to the other computer and set things up, is to cancel this render, because ScreamerNET can be confused if a new node suddenly pops up when things are running here. And then I will just use Screamer shutdown to close down all the ScreamerNET nodes that are running. Okay, so now I will go to my other workstation and set things up. So I've actually installed 2 computers, and it took me like well, both of them were actually turned off. So apart from the startup time, it took about 30 seconds to make those computers part of this ScreamerNET. So let's just go to ScreamerNET bats, and this should be node number 1. So I have node number 2 and node number 3 are running from 2 other computers. So let's pop back in here, and let's change the maximum CPU number to 3, and let's do a ScreamerNET. So it only detects 2 of them. I actually don't understand why it does that. It should detect all 3. So let's do another ScreamerNET just in case. Yeah, so there you have it. So let's add a scene to the list. So I've just used that one again, and let's hit ScreamerRender. So what happens right now is that ScreamerNET goes through all the nodes and makes sure that each node is given a frame to render. So when starting up ScreamerNET, sorry, it can look like nothing is happening, but you have to understand that these ACK and job files are a way for ScreamerNET to communicate to all computers in the network which frame they should render next. So there's a lot of that kind of information that is sent around these render nodes now. So that's why it can look like things are not happening, but just be a little bit patient. It works. So of course I have another content, another project that I would like to render with this setup. So of course I need to use package scene for that content as well, to bring it into this ScreamerNET session or ScreamerNET setup that I have created. So while this stuff is rendering, let's go back to my work Lightwave. Let's set or load from my Lightwave content. I will load this scene here, and of course I want Lightwave to change the content director now back to, well, whatever content it's set up to use. So let's do that, and this is a very heavy scene, so it will take some time for it to load. So I'll just pause the recording while it loads. So here we have this content, and it's very heavy because it's 101 characters, all driven by a unique MDD file. Let's just do a test render quickly here to see what it looks like. Shouldn't be too render intense, and this particular content is using interpolated Monte Carlo global illumination, and for some reason I do not get flicker when rendering this particular content. I think it has to do with the fact that it's an outdoor scene with deep points sun sky setup, and of course I'm rendering with motion blur as well. Water, you need that. Yeah, so this one is a little bit heavier to render, but it looks okay. It's a good test. The thing though with this content that I have done that is kind of stupid, let me show that, is I've gone away from the conventions that Lightwave has been designed with. So if you go in here, as I mentioned, these are all MDD files driving all these characters, but what I have done here is to not use the vertex cache folder. So I have actually been creative and put everything that is related to motions have been placed in motion. So I have DPM scans, I have MDDs, of course, a lot of them. I have motion files, the usual motion files that you can load and save in Lightwave, and I also have motion mixer, and all of this stuff is stored in motions, and this breaks Lightwave's convention with MDD files, for example, should reside in the vertex cache folder. So when I use package scene, and you will notice this, is that the vertex cache data is not copied over, because I have essentially been creative to use other folders and stuff where I want to store things. So that is something that you have to be careful with regarding package scene, that if you are doing things differently from how Lightwave is designed, Lightwave itself doesn't have problems with it, but tools like package scene will of course not work correctly. So again, I would just make sure that I set up a output render folder for this. Again, I want to go to my ScreamerNET content on N renders, and let's just create a new folder here. I will call it Janus production preset 1, and let's do a new subfolder here. I will call it ScreamerNET test. Let's save this files here. So let's save the scene, and let's use package scene to transfer all the assets over to my ScreamerNET setup. Okay, and everything is okay, so let's just hit OK. And since this content is much larger, it will take a little bit more time for package scene to do its magic. Let's pop into my ScreamerNET here and see where it is. Oh, so it's on 18% done already. That's cool. Okay, so package scene is finished. So I just hit cancel, and now you will see the problem. If I would load this scene now, which is called setup, and it resides in my ScreamerNET content. Let's open. Let's just wait for it, and you will see the problem. There we have it. So essentially what happens here is that, well, package scene doesn't understand, you know, the fact that I have put my MDD folder somewhere else. But as you can see, it's a local file path for these MDDs. So it's quite easy to fix this by going back in here. Let's go into the motions folder from my original content here. And I will take this MDD folder, copy that, go to N. Let's create a new folder called motions, and let's just paste that stuff in here. So this is a downside, of course, for this whole setup, because if I do things that Lightwave, you know, going away from the conventions that Lightwave has, you will end up with issues like this. But there is also always a solution, of course. So let's just wait for it to copy this stuff. Okay, so let's just hit OK again, and well, now it finds all the MDD files. The first MDD file, of course, for the hero character that's running close to the camera isn't loaded, because, well, if I reload this scene now, that character will work as well. So I know that this will work on ScreamerNET, so let's pop in here and let's just hit cancel render. I'm just waiting for that one to finish. Okay, let's remove that scene and let's add this scene instead now, and hit Screamer render, and we can see what happens. And everything should work. Scene loaded. So I paused the recording for a while just to let these frames render, and yeah, it works. So let's just show those renders here. Yeah, so it works nicely. Of course, there are limitations with ScreamerNET here. First and foremost, you don't have any way to control, you know, which frames should be rendered and stuff like that. As I mentioned before, this is a kind of a limited tool in many ways, but still useful for these kinds of renders. If you need, you know, have like super much control over frame ranges and stuff like that, there's no other solution than to use you know, a third-party commercial or free product to deal with those things. But let's say if I want to render some other frames, what I need to do is to load up that content, and let me actually reload this one now, because I'm going to save things. So you have to set up your scene files to rectify, you know, whether or not you want to render frame 1 to 10, or let's say 1 to 100, or well, 200 to 300, or whatever. You have to create specific scene files to deal with that, because you can't actually control anything here. What you can do is to start and stop renders, and put scene files in a queue. That's essentially the level of control you have from ScreamerNET here. So let's say I want to render like frame 1, this frame to frame 250, for example, I need to go to render globals and set that up. So 192 to 250. Let's save this scene as 192 to 250. So now if I go back to ScreamerNet here, let's just cancel the render, and now we have to wait for all the nodes to just finish what they're doing. And yeah, it will take a couple of minutes, so I will just pause the recording here. Okay, so let's just remove that scene, and let's add this other scene now, and we can see that the frame range has been corrected, so I can just hit Scream Render. So it's limited regarding control, but it works. So there we have that. Now another thing I would like to point out also is this kind of setup that I have done here with a new content directory for the ScreamerNet rendering and a separate content directory for where you work. Now, of course, it's tedious, you know, to have to use packet scene and transfer things over to this ScreamerNet version of the same content. At the same time, it allows you to kind of do a vertical slice of the project. Let's say, okay, we have to render everything we have right now, just send it over to the render farm, and while that stuff is rendering, you can continue to improve shots or change cameras and save scenes and all that stuff. The ScreamerNet part of the content directory will not be affected by that. So this setup that I have showed you guys in this video has that, you know, good thing with it, is that whatever you send over to ScreamerNet will render exactly the way it was sent over to that ScreamerNet content. If you continue to work, you should continue to work you know, while things are rendering. You should actually do that work from within the content that isn't on the ScreamerNet side of things, because you can change textures, you can do all this crazy stuff, and the renders that are being done are not going to be affected by that. So you are kind of locking off a shot so that it can render, and you will be able to continue to work on your assets without actually making those renders, you know, textures popping or objects just disappearing sometimes, and things like that. So there's a good thing with this setup, as well as the bad thing is that, you know, you have to transfer things. The good thing is that when you do that, you can continue to work without actually destroying the assets that are being rendered. Okay, so this wraps this tutorial. I hope you guys have seen that it isn't too much of a problem to set ScreamerNet up. And in the process here that I've showed you guys, you have the package scene side of things that can be kind of troublesome, you know, or tedious or whatever. But the good thing is that you're kind of locking off the content for rendering in that process. So and of course, it isn't that much that you need to know about networking in order to get a working ScreamerNet setup. So hopefully you guys will find this useful, and until next time, rock on.